the problem of the plague. It's a rough time for a lot of people dealing with a global pandemic. And throughout human history, plagues have puzzled us. They've caused problems in many ways. And when bad things happen to us, because we like to think we're good people, it causes us to wonder what is happening. Why is this coming to destroy my peace, my prosperity? What's up? Now, there are some people out there who believe that there's some sort of conspiracy, that this pandemic was orchestrated by a country or a group of people. Who knows? I kind of think that pandemics and plagues are part of the human condition, and that they come maybe at random times, maybe it's orchestrated, but they come to give us opportunity to show up in a way that generates a sense of our character, a sense of who we are fundamentally. You know, in Bible times, there were often times of famine and plague. And sometimes God would use the famine or the plague to accomplish a purpose. For instance, when Joseph was sold into slavery and went to Egypt, the famine allowed him to take a place of great influence and ultimately led to his ability to make a huge difference in the ancient world, including being able to be a place of refuge for his family. They came to Egypt and enjoyed many years there of prosperity and peace. But eventually they settled in a little too long, and Egypt, which started as a place of refuge, became a dungeon of imprisonment. It was at that time, as the people cried out to God, that he brought some more plagues, 10 to be exact, in order to get the attention of Pharaoh and his people so that they would be prepared to let God's people go. Not only to send them out of the country, but to send them out with lots of wealth and gifts. Well, interestingly enough, those plagues fell on Pharaoh and his people, but it wasn't long before the plague returned in the wilderness. As God's people sojourned from Egypt, they found themselves hungry and thirsty, complaining that they ever left Egypt, grumbling against God and against Moses, that their plight was worse now than it was before. How did God respond? With a plague. He brought a plague to bring destruction in hopes that his people would repent of their grumbling and complaining and come back to a place of gratitude and connection with their loving Father. Well, we know that in the Bible there are plenty of times where we are encouraged to endure hardship as discipline. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12, the Apostle Peter says, "Don't think it strange when some fiery ordeal comes upon you to test you." He says, "This is not strange at all. It's that your faith, which is more precious than gold, be purified." He says that hardship can make us better. In James, the first chapter, James says we should count it all joy when we meet various adversity, because the testing of our faith produces steadfastness, and we should let steadfastness have its full effect. We can be perfect, that we could gain wisdom and character. In my childhood, I remember thinking at times that I was, of all my friends, the most disadvantaged when it came to getting caught. It seemed that no matter what I did, I would get caught, even though my friends got off scot-free. I once staged a book drop in class, and when it came time for Miss Arnett, our 6th grade teacher, to stand and say, "What was the cause of that?" every eye went toward me. Yeah, I complained to God that I always got caught. But it was then he helped me realize that loving parents discipline their children. They don't let them get away with murder. They catch them, they call them up short when they step out of lines because they want them to learn to do life well. It occurred to me the other day that even though the United States has only 4% of the world's population, our figures for the pandemic were close to a quarter of the infections, and a huge number of deaths have occurred in our country. Does this mean God is out to get us, or that some conspiracy is targeted directly at our country? Well, I don't think we can say with certainty, but what we can say is that we can endure this hardship as discipline. We can take a look and see where we need to shift in our attitude. Are we grateful or are we complaining? Are we courageous or are we cowardly? Are we proud or are we humble? Have we been willing to repent and take responsibility for the things that we in our nation have done, which have not been loving and kind or just? The problem of the plague is huge. How do we respond in a time like this? There are lots of questions about how we can take responsibility personally and as a culture. But each of us has an opportunity in the face of this pandemic to ask ourselves, what is God's intention? Romans 8 says that God is at work in everything to bring about good if we love Him and are called according to His purpose. If we yield to His purpose, the plague can further that purpose in us if we allow it. Rather than trying to figure out where this came from or where it's going, try daily to endure hardship well, to endure discipline, knowing that, as Hebrews 12 tells us, every good father disciplines the son he loves, and that we can think it joy even though in the moment it is painful. My desire for my life, for my wife, and for my family, my desire for you is that in the problem of the plague, we find God's promise true and we embrace His goodness even in the face of this bad thing.